Yes. Shall we move on then to Sound of Metal?
Yes. Drummer Ruben, Riz Ahmed, is part of Blackgammon, a punk metal duo alongside his girlfriend Lou, played by Olivia Cook, playing hazardously loud shows every night. Or, as it turns out, catastrophically loud, as Ruben suddenly finds his hearing disappearing, something we experience through the film's excellent sound design and mixing, with shots from Ruben's point of view conveying to us the severity of his reduced perception. And it's worth pointing out this is far beyond the sort of let's make the sound a bit muffled for a moment thing you might have experienced in other films. Ruben consults a doctor who tells him he has lost between 80 and 90% of his hearing ability and that it will likely get worse, especially if he doesn't avoid loud sounds. In denial, or possibly simply at a loss as to what to do, Ruben nevertheless plays at that night's gig, but leaves mid-set before telling a confused and worried Lou what's going on. Lou, who at first seems more concerned than Ruben himself, foresees another problem. Ruben is a heroin addict who has been clean for 4 years, and she fears this problem could cause him to relapse. She therefore contacts his sponsor, who does some investigation and finds a deaf commune in Virginia, where a group of deaf addicts meet and who are willing to help Ruben. Here he is met by Joe, Paul Rassi, a Vietnam War veteran and recovering alcoholic who lost his hearing in the war. He aims to help Ruben come to terms with his deafness and to learn that deaf people don't need fixing. Ruben's reactions to his condition, his denial, and his assertions about getting things sorted mirror the behaviours of an addict, a similarity Joe points out to him. Separated from Lou, Ruben must enter the commune alone and surrender his car keys and phone. He finds some inner calm and acceptance after a while, as well as learning sign language, and becomes a popular figure in the community and the attached primary school. He never lets go of his plan to have surgery for cochlear implants though, and a video on the internet of Lou performing alone prompts him to sell all of his possessions, including the RV that was his and Lou's home, to raise funds for the surgery. Returning to the commune post-procedure, he doesn't get the reception he expected, and an angry and upset Joe tells Ruben he must leave the community immediately. This is a place for accepting, not repairing. Ruben is then left to make the rest of his journey on his own. The key to this film is the sound design, and it's really going to benefit from a decent sound system, or at least good headphones, and a lack of distractions, to allow you to appreciate the sound and lack of sound, as well as the silence, which isn't quite the same thing. Ruben's diminishing hearing, the weird robotic nature of the fake sound created by the implants, the oddness to hearing viewers of an entirely silent conversation, and the sign language conversations are subtitled for hearing viewers and the spoken conversations for deaf viewers, which is nice. The other key, things can have multiple keys, right, is Riz Ahmed, who is simply outstanding. He studied drumming for 6 months before shooting and also studied deafness and learned American Sign Language, things which clearly helped make his performance much more real and empathetic. Necessarily, Ruben doesn't get a huge amount of dialogue, or, to be fair, a huge amount of characterization. I'd love to know more about him and his past and passions, but Ahmed is acting with everything he's got. Movement, expression, position, and it just overcomes that lack. It's captivating. A few days removed from Sound of Metal now, and my initial appreciation is tarnished a little. While I still think it's an excellent film, the things that bothered me during the film bother me more, primarily the proscriptive nature of its tone. Deafness isn't a handicap, preaches Joe. But of course it is. It absolutely is, especially when it descends so suddenly. There are fewer ways to experience and sense the world. Life is necessarily rich. Life is necessarily less rich. The world necessarily more dangerous. Not allowing yourself to be limited by the inability to hear to the greatest extent possible, and certainly not allowing yourself to be defined by its absence, is a great philosophy, and that's certainly in there. But Joe's perception of Ruben's choice as a betrayal is offensive. It suggests an intolerance on director-writer Darius Marder's part. Deaf people don't need fixing, so getting the implants is antithetical to what it is to be deaf, and therefore wrong. rather than it being a choice made by this individual with this individual's history, this individual's needs, and this individual's desires in mind. Despite these reservations, I heartily recommend seeing it for the interesting sound design and especially for Ahmed's restrained, nuanced performance, which rises above his underwritten character, and in general for being a believable character drama that at every step eschews the melodrama that so often afflicts similar tales.
Yeah, I'm only a few hours removed from having finished watching Sound of Metal, so I've not thought about it in the same depth as you have. I didn't necessarily get that prescriptive nature of it. I mean, obviously that one character has some very specific views, but I didn't really take that as being anything more than that character's take on it.
I did feel that at first, but that's a couple of days on it, I feel a bit differently.
So I'm not sure about that, but certainly the rest of it I can wholeheartedly recommend it. It's a heck of a performance from Riz Ahmed, not to take anything away from that, but yeah, the real star of it was the sound design. It perhaps hits home a little more for me than anyone else. I've lost maybe half my hearing in 1 year. I've got tinnitus. I can't get rid of this buzzing. So, I quite appreciate this kind of stuff in sound design. It's nice to see this representation kind of thing. And it's just a heck of a film. And obviously, it's not narratively particularly heavy, if that's what you're going into it expecting. You're not going to get a great deal from it in that regard. But in terms of a kind of character study and a look at what something like this kind of event can do to one person in particular, it's tour de force. Really quite effective filmmaking, and a heck of an experience to go through. Yeah, but yes, the sound design is just absolutely incredible. If nothing else, it is worth watching for that. If you're the kind of person who is listening to a podcast about films, then you definitely need to watch this film. If nothing else, just as an example of how great sound design can be and how effective it can be in propelling the character development of one person. So yes, from that regard, if nothing else, it would be worth recommending. But thankfully, there are other things to recommend in it as well. So it's just a number of tremendous performances, and it's just a very compelling little film.
Yeah, it's just, I don't think I've seen a film like it, or even close to being like it in terms of the sound design. It's really interesting.
Absolutely, yeah.
And talking of sound, but in a different way also, Riz Ahmed, at least as far as I can tell from not being an American, but his accent seems flawless to me.
Yeah.
You can't tell he's from London.
Yes, and particularly given that I don't... Maybe I have, but I can't remember seeing him in anything since Four Lions, which is a...
You see Nightcrawler?
He is a Nightcrawler, but I still, to my shame, have not seen Nightcrawler.
You need to fix that.
Yes. But yes, it's very convincing. He's a very convincing actor, and very obviously very committed. I mean, six months of training on the drums, that's more than Ringo Starr did his entire career.
Oh dear.
He was in Rogue One.
Ringo Starr?
Yes.
So.
Yeah. It was one of the stormtroopers. It's really hard to tell under that costume. Yeah, it's again, I think even without the interesting sound design, it'd be more than worth watching simply for him alone. But then you add that very, very interesting sound design, which is what kind of makes it unique and not simply very good.
Yes, yes.
It's kind of what sets it apart. It's, for anybody not familiar with it, it's on Amazon Prime. It's an Amazon Studios film, so fairly easy to get to for a lot of people to get access to.